Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Beaton, joined by my co-host Donkey Teeth DT. How you doing over there?
What's up, B-Don? How are you?
I've been doing well. A little crazy this week at work, which just followed the craziness that was the Week 6 football schedule. I'm sure everybody had matchups affected by injuries, and now, you know, hopefully you're not, but more than likely you're looking at least some impact of one of these injuries that we're gonna have to cover here.
It's if you aren't impacted by an injury right now, you need to go to Vegas immediately and play any gambling game that you can.
Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, you might have just won the Powerball. That might be why you're not listening to our podcast anymore. But yeah, if you haven't had some injuries, good for you. I hate you a little bit inside, and yeah, thanks for taking all of the luck away from the rest of us.
What was
But
the
let's go.
Powerball? Did it get to like 1.5 billion or something like
Yeah,
that?
I
Was
think
it
it was like
above that?
1.4 or 1.5 billion, somewhere in that area. Yeah, that would have been nice, you know.
One day, man.
Yeah, just keep playing and definitely not just blowing money away at nothing. Definitely
You
not
got
what's happening.
you got to do the power play, right?
Always. I mean, you
Yeah,
always you always have to do it.
yeah. All right,
Uh,
let's talk about football.
yeah, let's get into it. There's lots of injuries. We're gonna start with the quarterbacks. We had our boy Justin Fields. He's got a dislocated thumb. Trevor Lawrence is dealing with a knee. Ryan Tannehill with an ankle. I mean, just in general, when a quarterback goes down, the first thing we have to ask is like, is anyone startable without the starting quarterbacks in there in these three scenarios? I mean, I don't think there's a backup among these three that we're feeling very good about.
No, it sounds like Trevor Lawrence is probably going to play. We're recording this Thursday lunchtime. Um, so it sounds like Trevor Lawrence is probably going to play. So that's good news there. Fields is definitely, well, I guess I shouldn't say definitely. I don't know that they've ruled him out officially, but he's not going to play. And then Tannehill is on bye this week. So this is the start sit show. So you're not gonna start those Titans on bye week. That's my big advice for this week, beat on. um, as a Bears fan, I'm going to the Bears game this week, by the way. Time that out well, right, to see the Bears without Fields. Uh, so they're playing Vegas this week. I think it's tough. It's tough to start. I think you still got to start DJ Moore, but it's tough to start anybody else. Komet, there's probably a decent argument for. Um, and then I know we're going to talk about the Bears running backs. I guess we can just jump right to that. Uh, Not feeling great about any of them without Fields. And then, we just don't know how it's going to shake out. Roshan is coming off of the concussion, so we don't know what his snap count's going to look like, right? Foreman was not good last week anyway, and it was basically all him. So it's really hard to start him. And then Darrington Evans, total wild card, but I wouldn't be starting him. So I think that there's an argument to start Roshan. He's got the most upside. He's an exciting player. They could just throw him into the fire, right? So I'd be okay starting Roshan if you're a little bit if you've run into some of these injury concerns and bye weeks are in full swing now, right, Beaton?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely dealing with all of the bye weeks going on, so that's something we just have to kind of work our way through. And so there's certainly some more difficult choices to be made now than there was a couple of weeks ago when we didn't have that happening. So I mean, I can definitely see a situation where you have to start Roshan because you're just looking at anything you can get from a running back this week, especially with the injuries. Um, Foreman, I think, he's an absolute desperation play. I think because Roshan is coming off of the concussion, I feel like they may not want to give him full like workload, and maybe that means there's some work for Foreman. But that would be, I think, the best case kind of scenario for Foreman is just him getting some work because they don't want to overburden Roshan coming back from the concussion protocol.
Yeah, I'd almost be more interested in starting Darrington Evans, as crazy as it sounds, just because we already know that Foreman is not good. It's not a good fantasy player based on last week.
Yeah, I mean, last week definitely wasn't a strong showing from him. I mean, 15 for 65. You could do worse, I guess, on the ground, but it's not good. I mean, Vegas is a good matchup, so you got that going for you. But yes, even if he was getting all the touches, it wouldn't be a strong recommend. And we expect if Roshan's out there that he's not going to be in the same kind of carry situation he was last week. I guess amongst the Jags, like you said, it seems like Lawrence should play. I mean, we don't know for sure. So we'll wait and see. He's been a limited participant in practice both Tuesday, Wednesday. We haven't gotten Thursday practice because those reports haven't come out yet. I mean, if he does happen to sit here, DT, I think ETN you almost have to play just because he's been playing so well, kind of on the same stretch as DJ Moore. I think Moore has actually been the number one receiver over the last 3 weeks, and ETN's been the number 2 running back in half PPR. So it's just a situation where I think you have to run them out there as well as they've been playing. Amongst the receivers in Jacksonville, I think you're kind of throwing a dart if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, because it's already kind of week to week, depending on what works for them that game. Even with Lawrence, without him, we don't have a frame of who's going to get targeted.
Yeah, and just to clarify here, B-Dun, they do play tonight, so there won't be any practice report for Trevor Lawrence. They're playing the Saints tonight.
Oh, that's right. They have the Thursday game. That's my bad. So yeah, we'll just see if he gets the
he's
nod
talking
here.
like he's going to play. So I'm saying he's probable, but who knows? You're right. Like anything can happen here before the game. So I agree. The receivers are it's tough to bench Calvin Ridley.
Assuming Lawrence plays, you're starting there. I guess if he doesn't play, that's where you start to run into it. I guess with the buys, there's a lot of guys that you're probably going to be, you have to start them even if they're not ideal. So the worst case scenario is you're starting a really good player without maybe their primary quarterback. That has gone really badly in some cases, and it's been okay in others. But I think you just throw your dart and hope for the best rather than starting, like a Kendrick Bourne or a Lazard type. I definitely take my chance over the waiver wire guys.
Yeah, that's just overthinking it. Like of course these guys might dead like any given week, right? A wide receiver might, but which guy is more likely to go off for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns? Like, the upside is so much higher with Ridley or Kirk versus Kendrick Bourne. Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and move off of that. That's, like you said, it's a Thursday night game. We're recording this at Thursday at lunchtime, so I'm going to try and get it out for the people before the game starts so that at least some people can listen to it and get that.
Yeah, hopefully that last 7 minutes we just talked isn't totally worthless.
But let's go ahead and move over. Let's talk about the Niners, who have the Monday night game, which makes their decision a whole different scenario to run through. CMC's dealing with an oblique. Deebo's got a shoulder. Trent Williams is hurt as well, their left tackle. So big injuries for San Francisco. It sounds like they are hopeful that all 3 are actually going to play this week, but we don't really have more than that at this point because they are the Monday game. I think today, or maybe they had an injury report yesterday, but they don't have to report as early as the Thursday and Sunday games do. So I guess the question is, well, CMC and Deebo, we know where we're at on bye weeks. It's not a great week for us. Are you waiting for them to play, or are you, potentially running somebody lesser out, knowing that, you may miss a CMC or a Deebo having a massive day if they do get on the field?
I think it's easier to run somebody lesser out at wide receiver, right? Like it's so hard to bench Christian McCaffrey at this stage. He's been so good. And we don't know. We don't know if he's going to play or it's not like he's doubtful or something like that. That would make the decision a little bit easier. So Deebo's not a must start anyway when he is playing. He's a solid wide receiver too, still, right? But he's not in that same realm as McCaffrey. So I'm waiting on McCaffrey, and assuming you've got decent options at wide receiver, I'm okay benching Deebo and staying out of that kind of headache. If you do have McCaffrey, yeah, you want to hopefully have one of his backups on the bench as you wait to see what happens there, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you want to have one of the backups. I know in a lot of my leagues that's not necessarily an option. They're grabbed up, and if your team's doing well, which if you have CMC, there's a decent possibility that you are doing okay in your league. You may not have that waiver priority to go ahead and get those guys. If you're sitting on CMC and you have an acceptable replacement, I think it's fine to go ahead and fire that guy up. The chances are, though, in a week like this, that you unfortunately don't have that option to where you can sit on. I'm trying to think of somebody that falls into the right range, like a Tyler Algier is. I'm waiting on Christian McCaffrey. He's on the lower side of a share. He's kind of a borderline start, anyways. But if you start getting to like Rashad White area where like he's getting a lot of touches, but maybe hasn't been as he hasn't been quite as productive as we would hope. Like we're gonna have more information by Sunday, so you have some time to hear what the news is. But if it sounds like CMC's leaning on like 50-50 or like game time decision, I wouldn't have any problem throwing like a Rashad White out there and letting him, start for me. Same with, like at Alexander Madison, same kind of scenario, just getting a lot of touches, but he's been very hit or miss at whether he's productive with it. Like I'm probably going with those guys, but for the most part, I'm with you. Like unless you have a starter running back, you're waiting to see if CFC plays.
Yeah, Madison just happens to be the one guy that plays Monday night against them, so that would be convenient.
Yeah, that one actually works out well. You're right. You're right.
But yeah, I don't disagree with you. There is that kind of flexibility of feeling out your team, right, and maybe waiting till those morning games play out, and hopefully you've got somebody in the afternoon game, and you're feeling good about your matchup, and McCaffrey is a true game time decision, and you throw out one of those guys in the afternoon or the night game Sunday just to, lock up 8 points or something like that, and you feel like you've got your matchup won, kind of a thing. Definitely an option.
Yeah. Like Brian Robinson is another one. Like just he's been good. I'd be comfortable starting him if the news doesn't sound overly optimistic or again game time decision type. I'm with you on wide receiver. It's a little easier to go in another direction. And Deebo's been kind of hit or miss in it just by himself. So he's not one that you feel is necessarily he's not an elite option, but he's been very good. But you can kind of get that week to week at receiver, like you were saying. All right, let's move on. I guess before we move on, real quick, if CMC sits, Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, who are you wanting out of that duo? What's your confidence level of saying you want one over the other? And let's talk about where they fit in if CMC does sit, because again, we're not going to get another shot at the podcast, so we might as well just talk about it now. And if we waste, a couple of minutes on it, then that's so be it.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's a decent discussion because with McCaffrey being the top fantasy player, like if he does go down later in the season, it's good to have thought about this. Both of these guys at this point should be rostered, even if McCaffrey does play. I think they deserve a spot in pretty much all 12-team leagues. 10-team league, I could see kicking them to the side if McCaffrey plays this week. But if you're the McCaffrey owner in a 10-team league, and one of these guys separates from the other, you're going to want to roster them to protect yourself because it's such a hard hit for your team to take, no matter how shallow the league is. Anyway, slight lean for me on Elijah Mitchell. But, he's coming off that injury. He played 7 snaps last week. Mason has been productive the last 2 weeks. He's found the end zone the last 2 weeks. That said, he only played 14 or 15 snaps last week even. So I don't think you're feeling super confident on either of these guys. And I got to imagine if McCaffrey's out, it'll be a relatively even split, assuming Mitchell is healthy. And that's kind of the question. Did he only play 7 snaps last week because he's, not back yet? And is he going to be back this week? But my lean is Mitchell just because we've seen Shanahan lean pretty heavy on him before. And when he's done that in the past, and I think back to Jeff Wilson, he has a tendency to go back to that well. So I think he could lean pretty heavy on Mitchell. But again, confidence level is low because of the injury, and who the hell knows, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I would say I'm also leaning Mitchell just because I feel like we've seen Mitchell and Mason both be options for them in the past, and they've gone with Mitchell. And by the past, I mean last year. Granted, Mitchell had his own injury thing going on last year too, so that was its own separate issue. But when they were both available, it was Mitchell that got the work. Then I don't know that he's fully healthy, but I would assume, like, if we're thinking rest of season, I would take Mitchell as the handcuff for now. If Jordan Mason comes out and gets, and CMC's out and Mason gets 65%, then, we know to change. But that's the way that I'm thinking as well. Is Mitchell's the backup. Mason got the work last week because he was healthier. He was getting the reps in practice. Whereas Elijah Mitchell, I don't think they even wanted him really to play in the game. He was a break glass in case of emergency, and they happened to have said emergency.
Yes, agree.
So I guess if we're looking at those guys, assuming CMC isn't playing, let's talk about, like, would you play either of them over Tyler Algier or Kareem Hunt, kind of, guys that are splitting a backfield?
Yeah, over Algier for me. I think I'd play both of them over Algier. I think I'll probably have both of them as back-end RB2 options. I've got Kareem Hunt a bit ahead of Algier, so it's kind of a different tier. Hunt may have seen kind of a turning point last week for Hunt, right? He may start to get more and more work. He came in late, right? He already did know the offense, though, so you'd think that it would be pretty quick that he kind of gets into the scheme and they trust him for more carries. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hunt continues to move up our rankings and the way that we look at him each week from here on. So I've got Hunt as a back end RB2. So I think I'll be in the same kind of ballpark with and this is one of the ones, right, where you're going to have to make that decision, right? Like maybe McCaffrey's ruled out early, and that you've got the option, but Hunt plays at noon on, noon for me in the Midwest, right? 1:00 for you on the East on the early games on Sunday. So, if McCaffrey's not ruled out early, then you're going Hunt. I guess that's stating the obvious, Speed on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on then. I just wanted to talk about those guys real quick. I guess with Deebo's shoulder, Ayuk becomes a must start. He was going to be a must start anyways, so there's nothing really changes there. If Deebo sits, which is possible, we've seen Deebo get banged up. It seems like they could potentially work a week without one of those 2 weapons. Ray McLeod, Jawan Jennings, Ronnie Bell. Are you interested in any of those guys as a potential flex play given, the bye week struggles?
Nah, it's such a gamble, like guessing who's going to get the targets on any given week if Deebo is out. So no, I'm really not interested. Like I'd have to be very desperate.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not looking at the 49ers passing game as it's not a high volume passing game to begin with. So I'm not going to take a secondary weapon if I don't have to. If I have to take one of them, I'm taking Ray McLeod. He got the most snaps last week after Deebo went down, and he's been playing more than the other 2 in general, even with the 2 healthy. So if you have to go there, I'm going for Ray McLeod, but I'll take any number of shots on other receivers before I'm going to this one, including like Jahan Dotson, who's been disappointing, but he dropped a ball last week that would have been, he wouldn't have been disappointing last week if he caught it. And Marvin Mims, who's kind of just a throw it against the wall and hope he gets a deep ball type of guy. I'd rather him than going with a Ray McLeod type as well.
Agree.
David Montgomery has rib issue. Sounds like, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting mixed signals. On one hand, they're like he could play this week, and the other hand, they're like it could be a few weeks that he's out. I'm going to lean towards he's probably not playing this week at least. So that means it's Jahmyr Gibbs, Craig Reynolds. Are you interested in? I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy that was drafted as he's going to be the Lions running back. Even with Monty out, is he going to be the Lions running back?
I think so. I mean, I think that he'll take more than Craig Reynolds will. First of all, the vibe I get is that Monty's out, so I agree with you there. I think Gibbs is a pretty strong RB2 play. Like, yeah, we could get rugged on Gibbs again, and they could lean heavier on Reynolds. It wouldn't shock me at all. But Gibbs' upside is so high, you're going to have pretty darn good options to play to bench Gibbs this week. I think at worst he should be a very strong flex play. Again, 10-team leagues, people can have ridiculous rosters and have 3 better options than Gibbs. But I think that they're, as far as Reynolds go, probably a sit unless you're in a really deep league or you've got these bye week issues and injury issues. Like, can totally see being very desperate and having to start him, but yeah, I would want to sit him.
Yes, I completely agree. Do not really want to roll Craig Reynolds out. I think he takes over what had been, the traditional goal line back role potentially. But I think that's the only part of like the Montgomery role he's taken. We got a preview of this in week 3 when Monty was out. 60% snap Gibbs, 29% Reynolds, and then they gave Zonovan Knight and Jason Kabinda a couple snaps in there as well. But I think it's Gibbs. And going against Baltimore specifically this week, I think you don't attack Baltimore up the middle. That's never been a thing that you can do, is run up the middle against Baltimore. So I think Gibbs just fits the matchup, in addition to the fact that he's so much more talented than Craig Reynolds.
Yeah, and just to add on, neither of these guys are like 100% healthy. So who the heck knows, right? Gibbs is coming back from a hamstring, Reynolds hamstring and toe. Neither of them practice Wednesday. Sounds like Gibbs is going to play, and Reynolds maybe a little bit more up in the air. So if Reynolds is out, I think Gibbs is a really strong RB2. But again, he could be limited too, right? Coming off a hamstring. So I'm starting Gibbs personally. There's some question marks still, though.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, and it's a good point that Gibbs has missed the last 2 weeks, and still really is listed as questionable. So there's really any number of ways that this could potentially go. I guess if everything goes bad and none of them are available, we're looking at Devin Azigbo and Mohamed Ibrahim. I would go with Azigbo. At least we've seen him be not completely horrendous at an NFL level. But it would be a complete desperation shot at that point.
Yeah, it feels like a trap, right? Where one of those times where everybody's like, "Oh, I'm going to pick this guy up and start him," and then they get 3 points. So
huge DFS play. Everybody picks him up, and then 7 for 10 yards, and got game script got them out real quick.
The fullback gets 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, all that bad kind of stuff that happens. Let's go ahead and move on. The Rams situation. Kyron has an ankle. He's going to be out, and it sounds like maybe for a few weeks, if not longer. So let's talk about, they have Zach Evans and Ronnie Rivers. That's who was last week. Royce Freeman and Myles Gaskin were brought in. This is kind of a mess here. I picked up Zach Evans. I feel like for this week, he's the guy, but I don't know what it looks like beyond this week.
Yeah, I think he's a decent flex play. But I agree with you. Who knows past this week? It did sound like Kyron's going to be out a couple weeks, right? It was like 2 to 4 was kind of the vibe that I was feeling there. So yeah, I think we'll see what happens this week, right? If Evans goes off, then he's one of those guys that you do want to have on your roster because he can move up pretty quickly for the next couple weeks with the rest of the backfield banged up. You bring in a guy like Royce Freeman and Myles Gaskin, it's going to take them some time to gain the coaching staff's trust, right?
Yeah, and just pick up the playbook and know what's going on. And Ronnie Rivers got put on IR, so it really is just like it's Zach Evans this week. I think I actually feel pretty okay about running him out. As okay as I can feel about not having. I mean, I don't think he's that good from a talent perspective, but he's in the right position this week to get that opportunity. I know we just said that about what may happen in Detroit, but we are taking it up a little bit of a level going to Zach Evans. So yeah, I would say Zach Evans, kind of a back end or mid RB2. And again, there's just not a lot of other options for you this week.
Yeah, I don't know. Something feels a little bit better about Zach Evans than a Zigbo.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's there's not a lot of pressure on the against the Rams. You're more worried about the outside weapons, so that helps, especially with Kyron out. So it doesn't feel like he's going to face stacked boxes like we might see in Detroit.
Yeah, at least Detroit has a really good offensive line, but still, it's an avoid situation if they get that deep on the depth chart. Evans has been there. He's been a guy that has gotten reps all through the preseason. They drafted him, so yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's move on to your boy DK Metcalf. Our boy has the hip issue. He hasn't practiced this week. We've seen him miss practice and then still make his way out there onto the field, even if he's not 100% healthy. But we've also seen that hinder his ability to some extent because he is just an athletic freak, and so if he's not healthy, maybe some of that's not there. What are you doing? I mean, Tyler Lockett, I think, he becomes must start almost in regards to just he's now getting more targets. Let's talk about that, and then I'll throw some names at you in regards to Lockett.
Well, on DK, first off, I think he said something to the effect last week that like it hasn't been hard for him to play through whatever he's dealing with. So he kind of shrugged it off like, I'm good to go. So I think DK is a must start, unless he doesn't go, right? Unless it gets worse or something like that. But I agree. Lockett is a strong play if DK is ever out. I think Gino leans on him pretty heavily, and he becomes a very solid wide receiver too, high-end wide receiver too, even maybe. So moving on to their other options, go ahead.
Yeah, so the third option there is obviously Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's been a little bit disappointing from an expectations. He was pretty unanimously dubbed the number one receiver in this draft class, and it just there's been, I don't know if I even want to say growing pains because he's just in an offense with two guys who are very knowledgeable in the offense and very talented. So it was always going to be a little bit of a growing scenario as the Seahawks kind of build towards the future there. But is this, if we get DK limited or out this week, are you feeling like the JSN breakout is coming, or are you still concerned?
Yeah, I think that there's a decent chance it comes if he's the number 2 option. He finally caught some passes last week. He was banged up himself, right? So we've seen it traditionally. Wide receivers take a little bit longer time to settle into offenses. I know that trend has kind of shifted in the past 4 or 5 years or whatever. We've got all these young breakout wide receivers, but like you said, the opportunity wasn't necessarily there coming in, right? behind two established really good receivers, and then he was hurt himself. So, but yeah, if he becomes number two, it seems like he's now settling in. He's probably picked up the playbook, and it could prime him for liftoff if that is the case. I'll probably rank him wide receiver 3 kind of territory. So in my top 36, if DK were to be out, or if Lockett were out for that matter. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. I like the talent. We're just going to have to wait for it to kind of shine here. I guess let's talk about JSN. If DK happens to miss some time, or if they say that if we think he might be limited in this game to some extent, would you put JSN then or Gabe Davis? He's been pretty good recently.
Yeah, I lean Gabe Davis, but I think you're in the right area there where it's feeling like a coin flip. But Gabe Davis has been pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean he's been getting it done. Obviously, last week was a little bit of a disappointment, 3 for 21. But before that, I mean he's been finding the end zone. That's what you get with being in the Buffalo Bills offense, is just more opportunities to find the the red zone and get in a score. So yeah, I'd probably go with you on that one. Go Davis, Drake London, who, I mean, it's Atlanta. I think we know that Drake London himself is good, but Atlanta's so bad.
You know, I'm a big Drake London fan. He had 12 targets last week, 9 targets the week before. So Ritter does seem to be leaning decently heavily on London. And like you said, the talent is there. So just give him some chances. And there's a decent chance that he finds the end zone on any given week. So I've got London higher than most. He's a solid wide receiver too for me moving forward.
All right, yeah, I think that's fair. What about Jaden Reed?
Reed
Take
versus
a step down a little bit here.
Smith and Jigba.
Yes,
Yeah, I'll go with JSN.
I will too, and I think I'm going that way, maybe regardless of DK status.
I think you're right. Yeah, he's
Because I
got the
think with
upside.
DK and Lockett both kind of being not 100%, you could definitely see him mixed in a little bit more this week, just to keep everybody, in the lineup week to week.
Yeah, he can always catch a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one I'm going to throw at you is Darius Slayton, who's, I mean, he's just been the epitome of boring this year, honestly.
Yeah, I'll go with JSN again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one's pretty easy. All right, so we talked about a bunch of injuries here. We covered a lot of things. I kind of sprung it on you last week. I forgot to throw it in the notes. I didn't forget to throw it in the notes. This week, let's do the favorite segment. Let's do asshole of the week, and then we'll get out of here, DT.
Yes, I am prepared this week. I had a terrible betting beat on the Patriots-Raiders game. I mean, there's an argument for me being the asshole betting on the Patriots with how horrible they've been, but it was kind of a play on rebound and Belichick being embarrassed and getting these guys into shape to at least lose by 3 points. And God, Garoppolo takes a sack on that last drive for a safety to lose me the spread. I was getting 3.5, and they were down 3, and they lose by. They were down 2. They lose by 4 on the safety. So, my God, just get rid of the ball. Ugh, asshole.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. That's that's a hell of a tough one to lose on. And I think you meant Mac Jones, but
yes, Mac Jones. Yes.
I'm gonna go with another game that probably cost Survivor Pool people, that cost parlayers. It cost us. So anybody who was making predictions, it cost San Francisco. You are a world championship contender. You're a world championship contender. I understand you lost CMC in the third quarter. You lost Deebo. Trent Williams left. I get it. You are a world championship contender, and you lost to the freaking Browns starting PJ Walker. And as a side note, anybody who has ever let Robbie Gould leave their team, you're included in this asshole of the week too, because every time Robbie Gould leaves, they replace him with a kicker who is just terrible. It doesn't matter from where Robbie Gould leaves. You're just so disappointed that you no longer have him in his just safety net of 50 and in field goals. Like, he's not going to hit 65 yarders, but 50 and in, he is just locked.
Yeah. No, it's true. They had some field goal struggles in that game. I watched a lot of it. Um, One of my friends, I had some friends over to play some cards and watch games, and they were all about that 49ers second half line, right? Like, oh, they can't lose the Browns. Whereas I'm over here
doubling down on it.
Yeah, I'm over here betting on the Patriots. Idiot. Jones. Other asshole, I don't know who that. I feel like it was the refs in this one, but you catch the end of that Sunday night game, the Bills Giants, like that was definitely pass interference 2 times in a row on Waller in the end zone, right?
It was. It definitely was. I mean, I get it to some extent. You want to allow them to play. If you're holding an arm down, if you're literally holding the person down, there's not a lot of like, let them play, because I mean, as an offensive player, you can't just, there's nothing you do. You're being held. You can't fight out of that at that point of the reception. So yeah, I would completely agree.
Yeah, at the same time, if the Bills lost that game, they're on the asshole list.
This is completely true. That maybe a little bit of the old NFL fixing came in there. Like, no, we're not. We called it once, guys. We gave them one penalty. That's all we're giving them. The Giants are not going to happen this year. They are like fetch. It's just not going to happen this year. Just let it go.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good group of assholes they'll beat on.
Yeah, I think that covers a good number of terrible betting losses and awful things in the NFL. We can just throw the injury bug on there too, since this what the whole show's been about. We talked about it before the show. There's always like 1 or 2 weeks, it feels like, every season where it just rips through teams and just rosters get decimated, which then leads to fun waiver wire periods, but it very rarely comes out with a whole lot of good of that waiver wire period. It's just we all lost good stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think there's always a stretch like this every season, and we're always like, oh, it's never been this bad, but it always is. It's always this bad.
Yeah, it is. I will say that the year itself has been kind of weird as a whole, but that's just fantasy football. Fantasy football is a weird sport. It's the first time I can really remember running backs like not almost always, and I say this from a statistic. I've run the numbers on this. Almost always, like the top 5 running backs, barring injury, finish somewhere in the top 10 to 15 running backs. Like, they are high on the running back. Like, you can't get that level of talent plus workload everywhere in the draft at running back. This year has been all over the place. Like, Raheem Mostert was a late round pick. Kyron Williams was a flyer. Definite Chain was a flyer. Zach Moss, I mean, we know his is kind of turning now, but like what he did early in the season. DeAndre Swift started as an early draft, and then he just plummeted. Montgomery, like there's a ton of guys who have just jumped up, specifically at the running back position, which is so weird for our game.
I blame Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think blaming Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, I think we just
Eckler.
blame both of them.
Yeah,
Eckler
too, yeah.
It's their fault for sitting out and ruining the running back landscape for us.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor too, even though he wasn't a top 5 pick. We'll throw him in there.
He would have been. He would have been. Well, maybe. I don't know if he was in top 5.
He'd be in the conversation.
He'd be an RB1 for sure, draft pick at least. All right, we're just ranting now. We'll go ahead and close out the show. If you still have questions for us, you can find us in the comments on youtube.com/Razzball Fantasy. You can find the Razzball crew on Sunday mornings answering all sorts of start sit, or if you have specific questions for DT and I, you can send them to us on Twitter. I am at RazBdon. He is at DonkeyTeeth87. Good luck in your matchups, avoiding injuries. Good luck with your bye weeks. And until next week, DT, I'll talk to you later.
Take care, everyone. See you, B9.